What is up, everybody? I'm No Lux Given here with your afternoon snap, and I had to throw together a video real quick. Bear with me, I'm going to try to do this all in one take because it's super late at night for me, but I was just playing this deck that I got from Glenn Jones himself on Twitter. Lily's very tired. You might have heard her just breathe out there. But I just got this deck from Glenn Jones on Twitter, and it's fantastic. I've only lost one game with it, and we're going to take a look at that one as well. We're going to look at basically 7 games in this video, and all the other 7 games that I've played with this deck have been wins. So I think that it is really, really fantastic. I will say I changed one card from Glenn's list. I took out Armor and I put in Lizard. And immediately seeing Monster Island here in this first game, I was already kind of regretting it, but I do think that Lizard along with Luke Cage is a pretty cool combo. You're playing Luke Cage. Well, I was playing Luke Cage before it got Spider-Hammed there, but in theory you are playing Luke Cage both because of the high Evo decks, which we'll see that coming up soon as well, but then also it stops the downside of Yellowjacket, the drawback of Yellowjacket. The goal of this deck is to play Yellowjacket, Wasp, Mjolnir, Hitmonkey, and Mysterio, plus the Mysterio clones, all on the final turn to grab an absolutely massive Hitmonkey. We will see this game. My opponent throws down a Shang-Chi in Monster Island, so my opponent has a little bit of a head start against us, but we do have a really good draw this game. We get to play Thor and Jane Foster, the Mighty Thor, so hopefully we're going to draw Mjolnir. We actually haven't drawn any of our zeros this game, so that makes it a little bit awkward. We are only 66% to draw Mjolnir here because we can only draw 2 of our zeros right now. Our hand is a little bit full up. There's probably some ways to play around that, try to drop some other stuff earlier. Don't focus on Pryde as much. This was my first game with the deck, so I think it all went pretty well considering. But we will take a look here. My opponent throws down the Armor into Starlight Citadel, and then they Spider-Man and they move my Thor over into the sewer system, where I'm already losing pretty big from that Shang-Chi. So that's a little bit awkward, but we do draw the Mjolnir if we decide to take advantage of that. And then here's the full combo. We're going to play 3 cards out of Mysterio, plus our 2 0-cost cards, a 5 power Pryde, and then that means that Hitmonkey gets to see us play 6 other things, so that'll be for 14 power, which means we definitely can win in the sewer system. So I'm going to go for it here. We're going to drop a bunch of stuff. We're actually battling for all 3 locations. So what did I say? That's a 14 power Hitmonkey, plus 5 more from the Pryde, plus 4 more from Mysterio, and then I guess 1 more from Yellowjacket, and then all of that power also goes on to Bishop as well, so that's 7 more power on Bishop. Arrow's gonna move around the Pryde. Wasn't thinking about Arrow. People haven't been playing Arrow recently, but it really doesn't matter. We play so much power on this final turn that we are able to get my opponent for 8 cubes here. Let's jump into the next one. Like I said, we're gonna look at 7 games in this video real quick, and actually it's not quite 7. I actually ran out of space on my phone. I've got a lot of other fun stuff to show you. I was planning on showing you the Cerebro games that got me to rank 80. I've been playing a bunch of Cerebro 3 as part of my recommendations for decks that beat Loki, but this is another great deck to beat Loki, and the key for that is the word deck. I brought this up in my video about the detailed different strategies and ways to beat Loki, and it was kind of like a footnote on a footnote in that video, but I did mention that playing some combination of Thors could be cool because they both say the word deck on them, and Loki adds cards to the hand, doesn't really interact as favorably with cards that interact with the deck. And you can see with this deck in particular, I mean, imagine giving your opponent a Wasp and a Yellowjacket off of their Loki. Loki ain't discounting that. Loki's going to make those cost 0. So they're not really going to get that much value out of those, and that's just a great way to kind of play into Loki. This game, I will say, I get pretty lucky here with Danger Room. It all kind of works out quite well for me. I don't have a single thing destroyed in Danger Room, just as a spoiler, if that's gonna, well, you know, you didn't have anything destroyed in Danger Room. Okay, well, neither did my opponent. Their Dracula's fine. And this is a double Sanctum Sanctorum game for the most part here. We are confined to that center location, so that's making things a little bit awkward, but I'm going to drop Jane on this turn for 8, just because if we take a look at the rest of my hand, it's going to be 6 energy, so I'm probably just going to play all of that next turn. If Jane gets destroyed, it's a little bit awkward, but I want to at least roll with it here, and then I know that these other 5 cards I can play in my other 5 open spaces next turn using all of my remaining energy. In Danger Room, we are going to miss on. My opponent throws out a Gambit, and Gambit is lucky enough here for me that that's going to hit my Lizard, which would have been a 5-power Lizard due to Luke Cage. So it's actually not like that much of a high roll for me, but it is still a high roll nonetheless. And then my opponent's last card gets destroyed with Danger Room, which is honestly probably a fine thing, because now it means that my opponent can throw their Marumasa? I forget the name of Dakin's blade, but they can throw that into Danger Room and potentially roll the 25%er that gets destroyed. I'm going to have an empty space here now because I did not draw Mysterio and my Jane got destroyed, but I'm still going to be able to drop a ton of power on this final turn. We've got Hitmonkey for 10, Kitty Pryde for 5, Luke Cage and Yellowjacket, and Wasp for a little bit more on top of that. So 25 power on the final turn, 20 power worth of cards, plus 5 more power into Bishop, and my opponent's Marumasa Blade, like I said, is going to get destroyed, but 25 power on the final turn means that I'm still beating my opponent. I knew this was going to be a differential game. This deck just adds so much power. They did miss discarding the Apocalypse to Dracula, so again, we do get a little bit lucky, but yeah. We're going to count it there. Let's jump ahead a little bit. We've got Wakanda in this one, so yeah, I think I've basically talked about everything the deck can talk about here, but we'll still look at a few more games. I think that most of these games were pretty fun. I didn't actually review them. I just played 8 games and said, all right, I gotta go to bed now. I'm really close to hitting rank 90, but I've got to go to bed at this point. So I'm just going to give you guys these games. I think they're fun ones. This one gets pretty spicy. If you can see what I am setting up for here, we throw Luke Cage into Gamma Lab, and then on turn 3, there's a few things that lead me down this path even further. One is these Quinjet lists don't often run Shang-Chi. Sometimes they do. They certainly can. They're just going to Loki their whole deck away or their whole hand away most of the time. But a lot of decks are like playing around Shang-Chi right now. So I'm just going to make 4 Hulks. I'm going to drop my whole hand and make 4 Hulks. And the other reason that I decide to go for this here, whereas like I might otherwise not, is we've got Attilan. So I'm going to draw 3 cards next turn and shuffle my hand in. Let's get my hand out of here. So that way we just kind of shrink our deck even more. And that'll potentially allow us to draw Mjolnir a little bit easier. So I'm going to throw down Thor now into Wakanda and just kind of hope that this 2 Hulk advantage is going to be enough to win us that center location. And then I'm just going to battle as hard as I can for Wakanda. My opponent grabs a 0-4 Yellowjacket there, kind of silly, off their Mirage. But that's another just interesting aspect to this deck. And now this turn I can play Bishop plus Mysterio. Generally you want to save the Mysterio for the Hit Monkey. Could just not play anything else this turn, and ultimately that's what I'm going to decide to do. I'm just going to hang on to Hit Monkey plus Mysterio for the final turn to try to put as much power into Wakanda as possible. Let's jump ahead just a wee little bit here. My opponent throws down Jeff and Agent Coulson and kind of spoiled it a little bit. I draw Angela on the final turn. That's not going to be anything too big for me. And then we'll see what my opponent has got going on here. They don't move their Jeff. They do play their Yellowjacket into the Gamma Lab, but they're not going to have a Shang-Chi. So it's just up to Hit Monkey, and Hit Monkey is going to be just enough to get it done, alongside the Mysterio clone, which will break the tie, of course, there. So again, pretty sweet, kind of a weird game, kind of a silly game, if we are being totally honest. Oh yeah, and another silly game coming up. I gotta pause it. Like I said, some of my recordings, the beginnings of them were deleted because I had to make some space in my phone. I did make some space, and I will still have those Cerebro games coming. So if you want to see that, make sure to stay tuned. Yeah, that was kind of a silly game with the Gamma Lab and with the Attalon, but I thought it was a fun one. This game I thought was fun as well because we can see, so all of these Mystiques on the board right here are copying this Darkhawk. They played Darkhawk, then they played Mystique. They've got double Sunspot, so they've got a lot of ways to like add power to the board. But what they weren't accounting for was I used Jane Foster, and it was really fun to actually watch in real time. So unfortunately I don't have the clip, but it would have been cool to see. But they had like all of these 10 power Darkhawks, and then I filled the white hot room on turn 4 with Kitty Pryde, wherever she is. She's face down right now. So I filled White Hot Room with Kitty Pryde on turn 4. On turn 5, I play Thor, shuffling a Mjolnir into my deck, and briefly all of these things go up to 12. And then I play Jane, and I drew 3 cards for my deck to shrink all 3 of my opponent's Darkhawks. Actually, all 4, as they are going to wind up playing another one this turn. And I don't actually add that much power on the final turn here. I play Rock and Wasp instead of the other 2 Mysterio clones just because I could, because I had the extra energy and cards to do so. And I actually did miss the win in the center location. Probably should have played around Rock Slide. I wasn't really doing the math. The numbers are so big with the deck that I didn't really care. I should have done the math though, because if my opponent had Rock Slide plus Shang-Chi into Jotunheim, I could have actually been in a little bit of an awkward spot there. So it didn't really matter, but definitely still should have played around it. This was an interesting game because we've got Warrior Falls and Altar of Death, and this was another game where I was definitely kind of wishing that I had armor just a little bit. Let me pause it real quick before this one wraps up here. Was kind of wishing that I had armor, so I will talk about that briefly. Glenn Jones had armor in his list, and he didn't mention what was in like the original list that inspired him to play this. He just posted his own list, which is the exact same as this one, just armor for Lizard. I decided to put in Lizard just for a little bit more power, which I thought could be relevant because we already have Luke Cage, and it's just a cute synergy that I like messing around with. Though I could certainly see playing armor because it's able to win weird locations like Altar of Death and Warrior Falls, or at least give you some game in those locations. But to that point, I could also just see playing Jeff. It's kind of a basic card, it's pretty straightforward, but Jeff is really good. If you're just looking for a card that costs 2 and can randomly win you games, Jeff is a very good card to play. And to that point, I actually think Scarlet Witch could slot in that spot as well. And lastly, like the Hulkbuster, I think you could potentially mess around with a few other things in that slot, potentially looking to play Spider-Man because of its synergy with Angela. So there's definitely still some room to play around with this deck, but this is the list that I went with. And let's take a look at this game here now, where I do not have armor, but ultimately I'm not going to submit this because I think So my opponent, by the way, you can see their sunspot is absolutely huge. They skipped turns 5 and 6 after magicking into limbo. So that's kind of curious. That probably means that She-Hulk plus Infinite is coming, and I think that my opponent is cheeky enough to play Infinite into Warrior Falls to try to destroy my Thor. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to play Mjolnir into Altar of Death last turn for like additional energy, but I don't actually wind up needing it. And I was able to use a Yellowjacket on turn 3 in Altar of Death, which helped me get out some things a little bit earlier on in this one. And then I battled with the Thor to try to get that a little bit bigger. I put the Hulkbuster on the Thor, that's why it was already a little bit bigger, and I guessed my opponent's play correctly. They did go for the Infinite into Warrior Falls. If they had just gone for the Infinite into Limbo, then they would have won. I could have put the Hit Monkey there instead, I believe. Let's see. Could I have done that? I would have gone up to 32. I guess if we're saying they put She-Hulk plus Infinite into Limbo, yeah, there was probably no way around that one. So that would have been, yeah, I definitely could have lost this game, but I correctly guessed what my opponent was going to do, and that's what Marvel Snap's about. This game, my phone completely ate, but we can see that I am almost at rank 90, and then I've got 2 more here to get through. So this one is a Quinjet game. We're going to be playing up against a Luke Cage deck, and I get Crossbones from the hub, which I'm like considering trying to play into, and I'm just now realizing something about this game. So I'm gonna zip ahead a little bit, because what I actually lose to this game is Legion. Okay, and I had to check if my opponent got Legion from the hub. But my opponent uses Legion here, pretty savage play. Legion, I still think, is the best card in Marvel Snap, like I said in Monday's video, just because it's able to find interesting ways to win games like this one. The Legion into Savage Land, I already had 2 cards in both of the other locations, which just means I was done. And this deck really needs to make use of all of its space without being able to play a bunch of cards on the final turn. Like I'm playing this Mjolnir, this Yellowjacket. Like I can't just play Hit Monkey for 14 power on the final turn. Games like this kind of make me regret not having America. If I had America, maybe we'd be able to like pressure my opponent here, because we'd be able to go up to 16 in the 3rd Savage Land. Maybe my opponent thinks that I could have America, but they could also just have like a Loki themselves. If they do the math, maybe they're just able to win by pumping up the collector even further. So I slow retreat. We'll see what my opponent has. I think that like maybe in some world, if you're feeling it, you could snap and just pretend that you're playing a 6-cost card, pretend that you just have Magneto in your deck or something, because we've definitely won that first location, right? But it's all just going to come down to, I guess, it really comes down to what I have. Assuming Loki is like a mid-range Loki here. Oh, you know what? You know what happened? I'm just now noticing Legion is from Agent Coulson. Wow. Okay. They got Legion from Agent Coulson. Good for them. Good for them. We'll take a look at one more game. I knew something was up with Legion because I have not seen the Quinjet list playing Legion that much. And they should. Legion, still the best card in Marvel Snap, I think. I did technically put out that video before Loki was released, so your mileage may vary. But let's take a look at one last game here. We've got Kitty Pryde, and we've got Avengers Compound, so I'll wind up running out Jane Foster into that location. Never mind. My opponent's going to Reality Stone that into Mirror Dimension, so I'll be able to Jane wherever I dang well please. And then we've got Attilan as location number 2 to end this video with as well. So I'm going to play Angela on turn 2 rather than pump up my Kitty, and that way we can get some things out of our hand, shuffle that all up, and draw 3 cards. That is the goal here. My opponent's going to play Soul Stone, which now doesn't draw a card, and then they're going to play Mind Stone, which still draws them 2. So they're doing okay here, and then our third location is Xandar. So this turn, my opponent doesn't have Reality Stone anymore. We're going to be shuffling all these cards away, so I'm just going to dump my hand here in some capacity, and ultimately I decide that I want to hang on to Kitty Pryde rather than play Thor and shuffle Mjolnir in our deck. It's kind of a cool thing that you can do sometimes with Attilan when you can dump all of these 0-cost cards. It is going to mean that if we redraw Jane later, really doesn't have that much use for us, but it is still cool that we can dump all of these cards out of our hand and then get 3 new ones. And now we'll see what we can do with those. My opponent hits me with a Green Goblin in Attilan under that Soul Stone, so that's a little bit of a nasty Green Goblin there, but we'll still be able to keep on. I feel like my conjugation's wrong here, but we're pumping up Angela with the kitty. My opponent's going to Viper over that Mind Stone. We see they're like a junk style deck, which is a little bit spooky considering how I just lost the previous game to all of those Raptors. So don't really love getting junked up with this deck, of course. We're doing okay. Xandar is like kind of not super great for my opponent because we are actually like that Mind Stone is worth 2 power, so I'll take it here. We do get the Hulkbuster on the Kitty Pryde. That wasn't essential that happened. I was just playing the Hulkbuster there to pump up Angela, and now we kind of get to have our cake and eat it too because I can move Kitty Pryde wherever I dang well please, and then my opponent is going to retreat. So only for 1 cube there to finish it off, but I thought I would still end and just show you guys every game that I have played with this deck because I think it is a sweet one. Let's rewind back here for a second, put that 11 power Kitty Pryde back on screen. But for today, that's going to be it for me. Let me know if you take this out for a spin. I'm going to keep on playing it because as you can see right here, I am almost at rank 90. So I'm going to go and get that. But first, I'm going to go get some sleep. That's going to be it for me today. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm No Lex Given. Peace.